Hello, everyone. The icon says we are live. So I am saying hello to everyone from Paris, and I'm happy to have on board Zoe and Ben, and we will all of us introduce each other. Maybe you can say a couple of words, Ben and Zoe, while I pull up the screen, and then we can formally start with our presentation.
Zoe, would like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm very pleased to be speaking with you guys today. It's really nice. And especially since we are talking about how privacy is important for consumers, so I'm very glad to be on this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Ben Rapp. I'm principal at Securys. We are the consultancy that runs the Privacy Made Positive program. On the basis of the research, we've produced this presentation, and we were very kindly sponsored by Didomi for this phase. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with Yannig and with all of you.
Thank you both. So I've pulled up the slides, which are which you should everyone should see. So please, if you do not see slides, that's a Privacy Made Positive: Why Good Privacy Sells and Bad Privacy Repels. Please shout out and make sure to correct that. But it looks like everything is fine. So thank you to everyone for being here. As you can see on this slide, this research and this presentation is both sponsored, commissioned, led by Securys and Didomi, led by Securys, obviously, and sponsored by Didomi. But maybe before talking about us, Zoe, you can present who you are and what you do.
Yes, with pleasure. So thank you for having me in this survey. I'm a French lawyer. I'm an IT and IP tech partner for a French law firm, but we work with international clients in the US and in Europe. I'm especially I have an expertise in data protection, and I'm also a privacy advocate. I write a lot of articles and columns in newspapers to promote privacy throughout the world, and especially a digital bill of rights that I hope we will have very soon.
Amazing, thank you. Merci. About Didomi, we are a consent and preference management platform. We build technology that helps companies put their users in control of their personal data. And we do that on two levels, consent management and preference management. So I will not go into the product in details. I just want to share that our SDK is deployed on 160,000 websites and apps, including in the United States, from which most of you in the audience are attending. It is deployed, it has been used, or it is being used on more than 2 billion devices, on which the Didomi solution collects and manages consent each quarter. And over 65 billion pages have been viewed or are being managed, so to speak, by the Didomi, or consent has been granted on billions of pages, here 65 billion of pages every month. So this is about Domi. Very quickly, here are some of the clients that we work with. These are mostly French logos, but we don't have only a French footprint. Let's not go into detail. Long story short, every company that needs to manage consent and preferences, whether it is for digital trackers, cookies, for email, for SMS, for any other digital marketing channel, or even in-store, can use a Didomi solution to organize this. And over to you, Ben.
Myself. There we go. Thank you, Yannig. Yeah, so we are a global privacy consulting firm. We work mostly with very large enterprise, but we have customers across the scale spectrum. We do all the things you'd expect, privacy as a service, privacy office support, DPO as a service, and more general consulting projects. But really what we're talking about today is an initiative that we've been running for about a year and a bit now. So Yannig, if you want to move to the next slide, let me talk about why we do this. So we have this view that privacy should be a positive value, and we founded the business on that basis. And we set out to prove it. And I think one of the things that we found when we did our original research was that there was very good evidence generally for ethics as a basis for business. And we have an ebook available for that research, which really sets out the stand that says, if you behave ethically and you treat all of your stakeholders appropriately and on a trusted basis, you will perform better financially. And those stakeholders include employees as well as consumers. And it drives both engagement and actually ultimately better profit and better share price. So having looked at that, we thought we would go out to consumers and see not how they felt about privacy and data, but what they did as a result of how their data is treated. And this presentation is really to look at the results of that research. This project is ongoing. You can go to privacymadepositive.com if you want to learn more about it. And we have a future phase coming looking at ESG and how privacy helps organizations position themselves with respect to ESG-driven investing. But really here we're focusing on how consumers engage with businesses as a result of their privacy posture. Yannig.
Thanks, Ben. There you go. So we're going to present you some of the survey results, not all of them. I have shared the link of the full survey that we have co-created or sponsored with Securys in the chat. Just one thing I want to get out of the way. None of us is associated in any formal way. Securys is independent from Didomi, which is independent from Zoe's law firm, and we're not endorsing each other. We're just having a shared passion and a shared interest in making sure people understand why privacy matters today for various reasons and on various levels, from the board level to the marketing function, to technologists, to lawyers, to the IT function, etc. So let's go into it. The survey that has been commissioned by Securys and has been run by Kantar Research in Europe shows that European consumers are concerned about personal data, and they know what personal data is. They're confident in their ability to understand what to put behind this concept. This is the high level learning of this slide, which basically in the four countries that we have results for show that in every one of them, Ireland, GB, England, France, and Germany, confidence about the definition of what personal data is and how much it matters is pretty clear. It's even striking. Ben and Zoe, is there anything that you want to add about this one?
I mean, I'm happy to come in here. I think there were two things we took from this. I mean, I want to say I'm conscious we have a strongly American audience here today, and we've been asked before whether we have similar data for the US, and the answer is not yet. This research is expensive, and we chose to commission it for what we felt were the target countries of interest for us in Europe. We are expanding quite strongly now into the US, and we expect to do a Privacy Made Positive survey in the US later on this year with a view to announcing results in Q1 of next year. But within this study, I think what you can take from this is not so much the awareness of personal data. You'd kind of expect that in Europe because of the publicity around GDPR, but the variance in concern. And we took the view that that correlates to the effectiveness of regulation. So there is a pretty direct correlation between the perceived effectiveness of the regulator and the degree to which data subjects are concerned. So if you think about that in a more global context, the less effective a regulator is, the more you would expect data subjects to have very strong concerns about how their data may be used. Zoe.
Yes, I think for the US market, what could be interesting is to take the figures that were drawn out from the Apple update that happened at the beginning of the year, where we can see that 96% of people have chosen to opt out of app tracking. And I think it was an amazing figure when you think about it, because people are always saying that the US market is behind in privacy matters. And privacy specialists like myself, we were always saying, but like people, they care about privacy in the US. It's just that the regulation is maybe not right there right now. And it's about giving them tools to be able to fight for their privacy. So this update was amazing because it could show with an amazing figure, which is much higher than the figures you can show in Europe, in the European market right now. It shows that the US market is ready for privacy, and that when given the choice, people will choose privacy. And what you're saying about the fact that in your country, if your regulator is strong on privacy, people maybe care less or care more about privacy. It's quite interesting. If you look to Ireland, where there's a lot of privacy concerns because a lot of the big tech companies have their headquarters in Ireland, it's a very trending topic and people care more about it than maybe in France, where there's a stronger regulator, where the CNIL is maybe a bit more stronger and a bit more aggressive in claims, and in Germany, where the German market and the German lawmakers are even taking more regulation than the European one right now. It's very interesting.
Thank you both. Ben, do you want to lead the conclusion that we have outlined, the conclusions that we've outlined here?
Sure. So this is actually Securys' mission statement slide, and this is the basis on which we founded the business. And it really says there are more reasons to approach privacy as a core value in an organization than just compliance and fear of regulators. And so we can see that strong regulation helps with consumer confidence, but ultimately, we think privacy is a trust building exercise, and we think that trust is right at the heart of organizational success. And so Privacy Made Positive is part of our campaign to get organizations to see privacy as a cross-organizational activity, not just something that you silo in a compliance function, and something that you treat as a positive value, an investment that will drive success and will drive measurable returns. And I think you'll see from the following slides that we have some evidence that there are measurable returns to be had from doing privacy well.
Please don't hesitate to share any learnings or any questions you may have for the audience in the US, but also the audience globally, if there's another one, on the research itself, but also anything that we say that you find interesting or striking, so that we can have a discussion. There will be a Q&A at the end, but please don't hesitate on your end. I will look at the questions and the comments just after, once I have passed the slide. Here we go. Do you want to lead it, Ben, so that I can look at the questions?
Sure. I mean, I think this is really, again, looking at both what's going on out there in the European universe, but also seeing Europe as a front runner for where privacy is going globally. We are seeing really significant numbers of consumers using the rights that they were granted by the GDPR. And I think this is a growing trend. It didn't happen, perhaps, as quickly as people feared when the GDPR first was implemented in 2018. But we're certainly seeing now that we have a significant number of people frequently exercising their privacy rights. So that will be asking for information, withdrawing consent, objecting to processing, requesting correction, requesting erasure. And we were surprised by both the size of these numbers and also, to some extent, by the age distribution. You'll see later, there are some other surprises around age distribution, but what we thought was interesting here is that the millennials that everybody tends to dismiss as being not concerned about privacy because they're the people who grew up with Facebook, it turns out are the most active group in exercising their privacy rights. So I think, Ireland aside, and we think Ireland is a bit of an outlier. There are some outlier groups here, but the basic trend here is that millennials are the most active. The second most active is split between Gen Zs, which is, I think, what you might expect as what I call digital natives, and Gen Xs, or I suppose late millennials. And I think this fact that actually there is a trend towards greater exercise of rights is something we need to be alert to, because I think this is going to, as Zoe pointed out with Apple, this is only going to grow. And that 96% number is a real wake-up call for people who think that consumers won't act.
Zoe, do you want to react?
And I completely agree. It's very interesting to see in figures what I have noticed in my practice, because I'm not very surprised to see what kind of people and ages of range of age of people more interested in their rights and exercising them. It's also, I think, because of the fact that it's easier to exercise them online. So maybe I think these people have have the habit in looking for information on an app or on a website, and it's easier for them to exercise their rights. But it's always great to see this in figures. And I also agree. I think this trend is only starting, and it's going to grow. And I think we are going to see an expansion of the markets in privacy, as well as for privacy tech, but also for privacy behavior. What I mean by that is, I think that consumers now are really looking into what the app is doing with their personal information. I think that there's something happened, and I think the COVID crisis really changed that too, because there's a concern about what is this app doing with my personal information. I'm using much more the digital tools, and I want to know what is happening. So I remember when the GDPR came into force, clients were very reluctant to apply these new rules. It was very complicated. It was a big text, and there was so many changes to make. And I remember legal professionals were saying, in 2 or 3 years' time, this is going to be a marketing speech for your company. You're going to say, you're not going to say I'm compliant with the GDPR. You're going to say I respect the privacy of my users. So it's amazing to see that this trend is finally arriving.
And if I thank you, Zoe. Now a couple of comments in the discussion. So Brad says we should be careful about just saying people. You're right, Brad. Obviously, it's some people who are young, old, women, men. I don't know whether gender has influence. We did cover that in the research, but we haven't put it in the slides yet for today. And some people are very educated. Some people really don't care. Some people are on casual occasions. Some people sometimes really want to look at things. So it is true, Brad, that there is a lot of heterogeneous behavior in what we call people. Michelle says, given this data, who writes the check for the privacy tech stack? Now, given the fact that we, offer privacy tech stack at Didomi, I can say the check was initially written mostly by compliance departments within our clients, and increasingly it's also done by ops, revenue ops, marketing ops, or information security. Very, very quick answer on a complex question, but that's kind of a long story short, who writes the check. Anything else you guys want to add, or should I go to the next one?
I think I'll just add 2 quick things. I mean, one is there's a lot more data in the research than we can show you in this deck, so do download the ebook. That has some very interesting stuff around age distribution in terms of concern rather than action. And what we found very interesting is that the older you get, the more worried you are, but the younger you are, the more you tend to do about it. So there is a sort of inverse curve there. The other thing on the who writes the check, we are beginning to see some of our earliest adopter customers putting privacy budget in marketing and privacy budget in HR as a selling tool, particularly in HR, where people realize that employee privacy is critical to attracting and retaining and motivating employees. It's that bi-directional exchange of trust that says, we're not going to over-survey you, and we can be trusted with the data that you give to us.
Thank you. A very interesting question, one of my favorite ones, was what are you concerned about as consumers in different countries? And here are some of the answers that we listed. Identity theft on the left, the use of data for other purposes than what you grant permission to, the transfer of your personal data outside of your home country, health data, or overall misuse of of data by government. So in other words, government surveillance. Ben, do you want to share some of the learnings that we have compiled here that not quickly, obviously, but in a short kind of snippet for people to understand what we found?
Sure. I mean, it's worth saying that these were the top 5 chosen from a list of 15. So we gave people a very wide range of options, and it was absolutely consistent. That was what was interesting. Across countries and pretty much across age groups, we saw the same concerns. And I think what stood out for us was that in their top 5 concerns, the identity theft was not a surprise as number 1, because that's, breach risk is still the thing that people are most worried about. But seeing how strongly what I think privacy professionals would think of as technical concerns, like extension of purpose and international transfers, how strongly those ranked in consumer concern really surprised us. I was expecting to see government surveillance and health data rank higher, and use of an extension of purpose right at the bottom. But it turns out that things like the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal have clearly woken consumers up to this. And so they are much more concerned about things that will commonly be buried somewhere on page 6 of your privacy notice. And we think one of the learnings from our research is that you need to be much more front and center about telling people what you're going to do with their information and where it's going, because clearly they're much more concerned about it than perhaps we expected.
And I was expecting digital tracking to be high on the list, and it actually wasn't so high on the list, which does mean that it's not a thing for people, obviously. But there are some surprising results that we found indeed. Zoe, do you want to react?
Thank you. It's very interesting. Could you give us, I think we talked about this together, but when was this study made? So just to understand the impacts of the COVID crisis maybe on the results.
Sure, the study was done in late February of this year, and we did the analysis on it in March. It's 4,200 odd respondents across the 4 countries. So GB, which is the UK excluding Northern Ireland, the Irish Republic, France and Germany, and it was done by Kantar on a properly balanced panel approach, so it should be fully representative of consumers. We've got a wide range of backgrounds and ages and genders and all the other things you need to have. So I think we would have anticipated, that's why I was expecting health data to be higher up the list because of COVID, but it turns out I think that there is, it was clearly in the top 5, but I think the concern about abuse of data generally for purposes other than those stated at the time of collection goes beyond just health data, and I think people are much more broadly concerned about that. And I think it's very interesting to see international transfers be high on the list. There will have been a Brexit effect from that, and there was clearly a Schrems 2 and Facebook CA effect from that also. But my take from this was that kind of Article 12 to 14 compliance around transparency is more important than people had, I think, anticipated. And that similarly, Article 44 compliance for international transfers is more important from a consumer perspective than perhaps we'd anticipated as privacy professionals on the inside.
What is very interesting is that what comes out from discussions of around privacy is very often I have nothing to hide, or it's a topic that is too complicated, I don't understand. So when you see studies like this one, the one you made, it's very interesting to see. So identity theft, it's normal. I completely agree. It was the first thing I was expecting too. But the use of data for other purposes and the transfer outside of your home country, it's very interesting for me because it shows that people are aware of what is happening. They are interested in, maybe they have read the news articles about what is happening, because it's obvious that use of data for other purposes, it's because there have been so many scandals about companies not being transparent about the data practices and using the personal information of their consumers for other purposes. And it's interesting that we can really see that there's been an impact on consumers of all the scandals in your survey. And what is interesting is that everything we can see here is for the European territory, there are legal obligations. Companies are supposed to make sure that there's no identity theft when they are storing personal information. Use of data for other purposes, you have the obligation normally to disclose what you're doing with the personal information of your consumer and asking his authorization for that. The transfer is the same thing. And afterwards, the health data and the government surveillance, I think it's also because of the times we are living right now, maybe. Yannig?
Yes, remember, Ben, we asked ourselves the question whether we should launch the survey at this moment, and eventually Kantar told you it's going to be okay, it's not going to bias the results, and it's interesting that this comes up again in Zoe's question. So the research is solid. We hope that this is representative of what Europeans in the countries we've surveyed think, and we hope to be able to maybe have the same type of research in the US to see whether there is a cross-state or national differences, and even differences between European countries and the US. So here's a couple of learnings from the first, let's say, section of this presentation, which is just a short summary of what we found. So consumers do engage with privacy notices and other materials, both pre-purchase and during their relationship with a brand. It is true that older consumers are more concerned, but all ages are engaged, and they are concerned about various privacy-related issues, and about some things that we sometimes would have thought or would have considered very, very legalistic, as we say here, but very specialist, but people care, and consumers care. We believe employees care. We believe investors care. This is coming back to the original vision of Ben that Ben you had for Privacy Made Positive with Securys, but this is the first couple of bullet points around this, those first results. Ben?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, some of what we're saying here is also drawing on material that isn't in this deck, but is in the book. So another encouragement to download the book. I think, what we're saying at this stage, we're about to move into the real meat, but what we're saying here is just looking at the level of concern, it continues to grow. If you look back at, particularly the PwC and Cisco studies that have come out over the last 2 or 3 years, you can plot a rising chart, a rising line of concern across age groups, pretty much across demographics. So, the age of privacy is coming, and you can see that in the US with, now I think 4 states have passed state privacy laws. You've got a wash of federal proposals in front of Congress across both sides of the House. So I think we are seeing governmental action, but we're definitely seeing consumer demand. Another thing that really stands out for me is those businesses that are beginning to use privacy as a marketing tool. Apple's been mentioned, and they're, tying their core marketing to privacy as a value, and I think that's fascinating. And you'll see in the coming slides why I think they're doing that and why I think they're right to do that.
Go ahead, Ben. I'll let you start with.
Okay, so
and I'll ask a question from the chat, but go ahead and I'll ask it after.
Okay, I mean, this is really where we started to look at what do people do about privacy. And the first thing we asked is, well, how much do you think about privacy before you buy something? What bearing does privacy have on your purchasing decision? And here, we were frankly astonished by the results to see that, between 70 and 80% of people routinely pay at least some attention to privacy pre-purchase, and that there's a strong base, between 1/5 and 2/5 of people, depending on the country, routinely pay a lot of attention to privacy before they decide to buy a product or engage with a service. Almost nobody pays no attention. This idea that consumers don't care is just wrong, right? Only between 1% and 3% pay no attention at all. And again, to Zoe's point, if only 4% of people are opting into tracking, then 96% of people care about it, right? And I think this told us that your privacy information is part of your marketing because people are looking at it pre-purchase. It's not a post-facto, oh gosh, what have I bought? Let me just figure out what's going on. It drives their purchasing decision. It contributes to it. Zoe, I don't know whether you want to comment on that in terms of the work that you do in producing this material and what your customers are asking for.
I think it's complicated because what I feel is like the market is asking for privacy. Regulation in Europe is very clear about privacy, and I think there's no doubt about what you're supposed to do when you're launching a product, launching a website, or using personal information for your business. And I think it's still very hard to persuade companies that privacy is important, which always amazes me because I think maybe there's this trend of consumers being more interested in privacy, but I think that at the contrary, for businesses, the GDPR fear is now not something very important for them. I think when GDPR arrived, a lot of businesses were afraid of penalties because they were very high, and they understood that now they could be in a very big trouble if they were not respecting the GDPR. Where in fact, I think that the fact that there were so many scandals and so many claims and so many data protection authorities are under too much work and not maybe finding like they should be, I think that businesses are not very interested in privacy anymore, which is crazy when you think about it, because the trend for consumers is the total opposite. And I feel it's interesting. In France, quite recently, it has been mandatory for companies in their cookie banners to be very clear about, do you authorize cookies and they now have to have something very clear about, I reject all cookies on my websites. And I've been seeing so many people, and if you look at the statistics of how many people are now rejecting cookies in France, now that they have a very clear choice, people are saying no. In fact, it shows that the markets and the consumers were only waiting for transparency and easy tools. And I see that now that it's easy, and if you're being honest on your practices, people are choosing privacy. It's just that they were not given the choice before, which is quite interesting. Yannig?
On this side, I do agree that the French authority was very active, and it still is probably among the most active in the world, in Europe and in the world, even though we don't do everything better than the rest of the world. But on this case, there is indeed a very strong set of guidelines. We were surprised to find out that once our clients who have implemented cookie banners that do provide more choice than before, because some of them switched at the last moment when they only had to switch, the opt-in rates didn't actually plummet. So I'll share in the chat a webinar that you can watch without having to subscribe or anything of one of our French clients, a broadcaster, who explains how much, how their numbers moved, but it wasn't so spectacular as the example that you had at the beginning for the Apple opt-in message prompt. So that's kind of small. Just put it in the chat now. Small addition. I just would like to raise a question by Geoff that you could answer, Ben, I guess, because you were hands-on in the research, the brain and the hands and the analysts. Was it asked if they felt empowered to do anything about their concerns in the research?
We didn't ask if they felt empowered because, as you'll see with the next few slides, we really asked what they did about it. So it wasn't so much about how they felt as how they acted. And this was, moving into this slide, this is why Apple are doing what they're doing, right? This is the reality, that we are already seeing something like 2/5 of consumers willing to pay more to get better privacy. And in Europe, I have to start this by saying privacy is a right, and we're not saying that you should charge people for things that they have a right to. I don't have to say that in the US in quite the same way. But what we're really saying here, we didn't ask people, would you pay for privacy? We're saying, would you pay for better privacy? And specifically, if you're comparing two products, would you pay more for the one that has better privacy? Or would you, if they're the same price, would you select the one that has better privacy? We'll talk about selection preference on the next slide. But here, Apple are effectively going long saying people will pay a premium for better privacy baked into our whole, walled garden ecosystem. And, Apple are more expensive than a Shenzhen generic Android phone. And they are saying part of the reason why you'll pay more for an iPhone is because you have better privacy. And what we're saying here is this really signals two things. It signals that privacy carries a price premium and that people will pay that. So if you spend money on privacy, you will recover it in price. It also signals that the consumers are seeing it as part of the value proposition, right? So they will pay a price premium for it, but also they will pay for a service rather than paying with their data. And I think this for me is the other really compelling proposition, that if you look at businesses, we tend to use Strava as an example, because they have always said we won't sell data, instead we'll charge for the product. And so where you currently fund your service by selling user data, there is at least 2/5 of the audience that would rather pay you and not give you their data.
The difficulty is with this slide is presenting privacy as you said, Ben, as a privilege or as something that needs to be paid for. While you say it, Ben, it's interesting because when I get the prompt, whether my smartphone or my computer wants to, or my browser obviously needs to keep my bank details when I do a payment, I'm now more inclined to do it for when Apple asks me than when Google, which is my phone here, asks me. Now, how much that it is really not rational. It's really about, okay, I know at one place it's probably going to be secure, at another one I don't really know. While I'm a very happy Google user, but it is funny how this indeed is very kind of has deeply ingrained connections or consequences on the way we think, even though sometimes we don't even rationalize it. Is there something that you'd like to add, either one of you?
Just one thought. It's when I hear you both speak about this and looking at this slide, it's for me it really shows that it's like, don't lie about your business. It's either you need to be transparent on what is your business model, and today if you need you can't have a product which is free and based on using personal information. So you'd rather say your product is, you rather ask your consumers to pay for your products, rather than saying I'm free and in fact you're not free, you're making money out of the personal information of your consumers. So I think this slide, yeah, it's very interesting, and it goes with everything we were saying before about the fact that honesty, transparency are now part of marketing, and I think something very important for consumers.
Thank you. And thank you. Let me check your name again. Thank you, Abhishek, for sharing some of the opt-in rates in the link that you shared. So the most recent opt-in rates on Apple's seems to indicate that we are at 15% globally. So now I know that there have been a lot of debate about methodology, and we're not here to talk about Apple's tracking, but it's interesting to see those numbers evolve, and a lot of people now talk about it. All of us have part of the answer, and in a world that's complex, we need to have convictions, and those convictions are overall that privacy drives value for business, which is what we believe and what we also want to enable, and obviously that consumers and citizens deserve some rights that they shouldn't have to pay for necessarily, or not at all even. Ben, can I let you introduce or present this slide?
Sure. I mean, this for us was the killer slide. This was the point of doing the study, right? And what we wanted to find out was how consumers act. And what we found was really interesting. We found really substantial numbers of consumers who will buy because of privacy, really substantial numbers of consumers who don't follow through. So effectively, if you're thinking as an e-commerce person, this is your basket abandon. They get to the point where they're ready to buy the thing, and then they read the privacy policy and they decide not to. And we were seeing anywhere up to 70% of people saying that they have abandoned a purchase because they weren't comfortable with the privacy prospects that they were facing if they went through with it. And then we saw 70% of people saying, you know, in some cases, it varies depending whether you're talking about frequently or sometimes, but anywhere up to 3/5 of people have stopped buying something that they were buying, stopped using something that they were using because they became concerned about poor privacy. And, you know, some of this is going to be people who are using WhatsApp and switched to Signal, but it's broader than that. And what this told us is, firstly, that if you think about Cisco's privacy actives number that we cite in the first ebook, these numbers are roughly double that. Secondly, this is directly hitting businesses in the pocketbook. This is people who are either choosing to buy something because it has privacy, which implies, of course, that those competitors that had worse privacy are losing out, or people who are abandoning product or abandoning services because they felt the privacy was poor. And I think that the scale of these numbers tells us that privacy is a really significant part of the consumer decision-making journey.
And we have a popular comment by Melanie in the chat, which says that you know, there is the point that a company, a brand is making once or twice in order to make a compelling point about privacy, and then there's the fact to enforce it and regularly take it as a guiding light in whatever you do, and not just a tactical decision or a marketing tactic. And there are lots of plus ones for this. Zoe, do you want to react to Ben's comments, or even to Melanie's?
I agree with your analysis, Ben, and I'm quite surprised, in fact, with these figures, because what I've always been noticing is that I have always been convinced that people care about privacy and that it's important for them, and it's just that it's something that has been, it's a right that is very complicated to exercise because you don't want to change your habits. So I'm very surprised when I see so strong figures showing that people that are concerned, and when having a choice, they will switch products, because you were like quoting the changes from WhatsApp to Signal, and I think there was like maybe during a week people were changing, but a lot of people went back to WhatsApp, or they didn't really leave it, or now are using both apps, and it was a trend for a while. I don't have the figures, but so it's quite surprising that seeing that when given alternatives, people are changing, and it's very positive. It's positive to see that. And for the comments of Melanie,
Zoe,
I don't want to be commenting on the Apple practices, but I agree that it's one thing to be using privacy as a marketing tool because you're really into privacy, and it's another thing to just be using privacy because it's a trend, but in fact, you're not really respecting privacy of your users. So without quoting Apple or any other company, of course, I think it would really harm more a company to pretend they are into privacy just with one marketing tool like opt-outs and not being very respectful of the privacy of their users. And I think it's something that is going to be a question for Apple, notably, because what is Apple doing with the data they are collecting? This is something they are not very transparent about. But maybe it's another topic.
Yeah, we have the backstage tells me we have 5 minutes to go. Ben, will you want to, or can you walk us through some of the learnings that we've listed here, and then we'll take a couple of questions, which we've taken already, but we'll have time for one or two.
Sure. I mean, I think this goes to everything we've said. Nothing's free, right? Engineers have to be paid, servers have to be paid for, bandwidth has to be paid for. You can't have a free product. So either you charge for it directly and explicitly and transparently, or you find some other way to pay for it, which generally involves monetizing user data. And I think what we're saying is there is a strong base of consumers who would prefer to be charged explicitly for the thing that they're buying, which of course is also a test of how much they want it. And I think we need to see a move away from this idea that every internet service in particular is somehow paid for by advertising, and moving towards a more transparent funding model. To Melanie's point, which is absolutely on point, it's not a one-shot thing. It's not one post about privacy on Twitter. It's a visible, comprehensible, and evidenced commitment. You've got to have privacy written through your brand. There's a lot more in the ebook about brand and brand trust and how that works. And there's a lot more still in the first ebook that talks about how brand contributes to privacy. So what Apple are doing is trying to associate their brand with privacy. They're not doing a one-shot exercise. They're making it one of their brand pillars. Nobody is saying that privacy is going to be your only selection criterion. You're also going to you're going to have to like the device and be prepared to pay the price and want the features and the rest of it. But what we're saying is you get a better preponderance to purchase out of having good privacy. So I think that's really the core point that we're making here. And just to finish off on that conclusion slide, if you do it badly, people are going to leave. If you acquire a reputation for processing data inappropriately or abusing data, you will lose customers. It's that straightforward. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. It's both sides of the coin.
I agree. Just to finish, sorry, and
go ahead,
I completely agree with you. And I hope that not only companies are going to take actions upon this this discussion and these results, but also regulators, and see that it's something important for consumers, and an unregulated market is something that maybe cannot subsist right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Ben, I think you should read David's comment, which is he's emphasizing how much it is important to link privacy to profit, and this is exactly the vision that you had when you initiated. Ben is putting the
David is absolutely right.
This is exactly the vision that you had with Privacy Made Positive. I do have to credit Securys for having this, and Ben obviously for having this vision, which is okay. It is not just a marketing tactic. It is not only a consumer perception matter. It is a board level discussion that touches HR, employees, that touches suppliers. Sorry, even tomorrow the stock market or investors. So Ben, maybe you can conclude just after. I just would like to invite you, if you guys are interested in the session here, to our next webinar, in which we'll present the last part of the Privacy Made Positive research results. It will be Ben and our CEO Romain on July 22nd, and to download obviously the ebook on Securys, on Privacy Made Positive, the Privacy Made Positive website, or on Didomi's website, as you want. And that's it for me. Maybe I can let both of you have a final word, and thank you both for participating, and thank you all for listening to us.
Thank you, Yannig. Zoe, do you want to?
Thank
Have a
you.
last
No,
word?
I'm finished. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for inviting me on this talk. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Zoe. I mean, I would just encourage everybody to download both the ebooks. There's a lot of research and extra data there. You'll find a lot of material that you can use to convince your stakeholders that they should invest in privacy. That was really why we did this. We wanted to give privacy professionals a tool set to get the C-suite to buy in. So you will find material there, charts that you can put in front of your CFO and say, we will make more money if we do this right. And that tends to get them to pay more attention.
Great conclusion. Thank you all. And I let the event team end the session.